At 8:45 on Thursday morning, 14th of May 2026, a quiet street in Canberra's inner north became the centre of a police investigation. Emergency services were called to a home on Dryandra Street, O'Connor, after reports that a man had allegedly stabbed a relative with a knife. At first, it sounded like a domestic emergency, urgent, dangerous, but still unfolding. Then police arrived. Inside the residence, paramedics found a woman with critical injuries. She was treated at the scene, placed in an ambulance, and rushed towards hospital. But she did not make it there alive. A second man inside the home was also injured. A 51-year-old man was arrested at the scene and taken to hospital under police guard. But this case was not immediately complete. The woman's name had not been released. The exact family relationship had not yet been made public, and as investigators sealed off the area around the home, one crucial question remained open. Where was the weapon? Because in a case like this, the first call tells police where to go, but the evidence inside the house tells them what really happened before anyone dialed 000. At 1:30, the story begins with the call. Not a headline, not a courtroom file. Just one emergency report sent through on a Thursday morning, 14th of May, 2026. Police and emergency services were directed to a residence on Dryandra Street in O'Connor, a suburb in Canberra's inner north. The time was about 8:45 a.m. The information they had was limited but serious. A man had allegedly stabbed a relative with a knife. That detail matters. When officers hear the words relative and knife in the same call, they are not walking into a simple disturbance. They are responding to a private home where danger may still be active, where people inside could be injured, frightened, unable to speak, or trying to get away. And in those first minutes, nothing is clear. The person who made the call has not been publicly identified. Police had not yet explained what happened before 000 was contacted. They did not yet know, at least publicly, the full sequence inside the house. Was the alleged attack still unfolding? Had someone tried to intervene? Were there other people inside? Was the weapon still in the room, or had it already been moved? These are not dramatic guesses. They are the first practical questions any serious investigation must answer. Because a residence is not an open street, inside a home, every room can matter. A hallway can show movement. A doorway can show struggle. A kitchen bench, a bedroom floor, a bathroom tap, even the position of a phone can help rebuild the minutes before police arrived. So when the first responders reached Dryandra Street, their job was not only to find a suspect, their first priority was life. Secure the scene, locate the injured, make sure no one else was in immediate danger. Then preserve whatever evidence remained. At that moment, the case was still being written in real time. No names had been released, no charges had been laid. The relationship had not been fully explained. All investigators had was a quiet Canberra address, a report of a stabbing inside a family setting, and a scene that was about to become far more serious than the first call could explain. That first report brought police to the address. What they found inside made the case far more serious. At the residence on Dryandra Street, paramedics located a woman with critical injuries. Publicly, police have not released her name. ABC later reported she was a woman in her 70s. But at that moment, inside the home, her age was not the first issue. Her condition was. She was still alive when emergency crews began treating her. That detail matters. It means this was not a scene where police simply arrived after everything was over. There was still an attempt to save her. Paramedics worked at the house, then placed her in an ambulance and began transporting her to hospital. She did not survive the journey. Police later confirmed she was declared deceased during transportation. That is the point where the investigation changed. What began as a reported stabbing inside a family setting was now a fatal incident. From that point forward, every movement inside the home had to be treated as evidence. Where was she first found? How far had she moved after being injured? Was there any sign that someone tried to assist her? Were there signs of a struggle in one room or movement through more than one part of the residence? Those answers have not been made public, but they are the kinds of details investigators would need before they could understand the sequence. A fatal stabbing investigation is not built from one wound, one call, or one arrest. It is built from timing, position, blood evidence, witness accounts, medical findings, and the physical layout of the scene. And a home makes that work even more exact. A lounge room may show where people were standing. A hallway may show who moved away from whom. A doorway may show whether someone tried to leave. A kitchen may become important if a knife was reported. A phone may show the moment the outside world first learned something was wrong. None of that can be assumed. It has to be documented. So while paramedics were dealing with the woman's injuries, police had a second problem. They had to control the house without losing the evidence inside it. That means limiting who goes in. It means identifying every person present. It means separating urgent medical care from forensic preservation. And by the time the woman was declared deceased on the way to hospital, Dryandra Street was no longer just the location of an emergency call. It was the center of a death investigation. But there was another injured person inside the home, and that survivor could become one of the most important sources of information in the entire case. That survivor matters because his presence changes the structure of the case. Police confirmed that another man, also a resident of the Dryandra Street home, was injured during the incident and taken to hospital. ABC reported that he was in his 70s and that his condition was stable. Those details are limited, but they are not minor. This was not a scene involving only a deceased woman and a man in custody. There was another person inside the residence who came out injured, alive, and potentially able to help investigators rebuild what happened before emergency services arrived. His exact role has not been publicly explained. Police have not said whether he witnessed the alleged stabbing, whether he tried to intervene, where inside the house he was injured, or whether his injuries occurred before, during, or after the attack on the woman. That silence should not be filled with assumption. In an active investigation, the absence of public detail does not mean there are no answers. It usually means those answers are being checked against medical evidence, forensic findings, and witness accounts before anything is released. For investigators, the second injured resident may become central to the timeline. He could help establish what happened inside the home before 8:45 a.m., whether the violence began suddenly or escalated over time, and whether the first emergency report captured the full sequence or only the final moments. If he saw the incident clearly, his statement could become one of the most important pieces of evidence. If he did not see everything, his injuries may still help show movement through the residence, the position of people inside the house, or whether more than one area became part of the scene. But at this stage, the confirmed facts remain narrow. He lived at the property. He was injured. He survived. He was taken to hospital. Anything beyond that must wait for police, medical findings, or court documents. That restraint matters because a private home can mislead the public very quickly. People want family labels, motives, and a clean explanation. Investigators need something harder: timing, location, injury patterns, physical evidence, and statements that can survive legal scrutiny. So, by this point, the case had 3 fixed points. A woman had died after being critically injured. A second resident was alive but wounded. A 51-year-old man had been taken into custody at the scene. What remained unknown was the sequence connecting all 3. And that is why the arrest did not end the investigation. It only gave police one person to hold while the evidence inside the home began to speak. That is where the arrest becomes important, but not final. Police confirmed that a 51-year-old man was taken into custody at the Dryandra Street residence. He was not identified in a later search. He was not described as someone located away from the property. He was arrested at the same address where the woman was found critically injured and where the second resident had also sustained injuries. After that arrest, he was transported to hospital and remained under police guard. That detail creates one clear fact and several unanswered questions. The clear fact is that police had physical control of the man they believed was connected to the incident. The unanswered part is everything around that moment. The first public update did not explain his condition. It did not say whether he was injured. It did not say what room he was in when officers arrived, whether he spoke to police, or what he was doing when he was taken into custody. Those details matter because an arrest at the scene can look simple from the outside, but legally it is only one step in a much longer process. Police also confirmed he was a relative of the woman who died. That is a major point, but it must be handled carefully. At this stage, investigators had not publicly clarified the exact relationship. They did not say he was her son, husband, brother, or any other specific family role. Detective Acting Inspector Chris Watson said that further clarification could not be given because not all family members were aware of what had occurred. That means the public did not yet have the right to fill in the missing label. This is where many true crime stories go wrong. A relative becomes a motive. A household becomes a theory. An arrest becomes a conviction. But none of those steps had been established here. What police had was a fatal incident, a surviving injured resident, a 51-year-old man under guard in hospital, and an active scene that still needed to be processed. Charges had not yet been laid in the initial police release. Investigators said they were expected at a later time. That wording matters. It means police were still moving from emergency response into legal construction. They had to determine what evidence supported which offence, whether the weapon could be located, what the medical findings showed, and how the accounts from surviving witnesses matched the physical scene. So the arrest did not close the case. It narrowed the focus. It gave investigators someone to hold, question, and guard. But the legal story still had to be built from evidence, not assumption. And one of the most important pieces of that evidence had still not been publicly confirmed: the weapon. The next problem was the weapon. On May 14th, investigators were still treating that question as active. The first report to emergency services described a knife. The later police update said the 51-year-old man allegedly stabbed his 79-year-old mother with a knife. But in the early stage of the investigation, ACT policing had not publicly laid out a full recovery account for the weapon itself. That gap matters because in a stabbing case, the weapon is not just an object. It can confirm the first report, connect injuries to a specific blade, show handling, contain biological evidence, and help reconstruct where the violence began. This is why the search could not be treated as a minor detail. A home has many places where a knife can be found, moved, dropped, cleaned, hidden, or overlooked during the first emergency response. A kitchen drawer is only one possibility. A sink, bin, backyard, bathroom, laundry area, car, hallway, or nearby outdoor space can all become relevant depending on the movement inside the residence. None of that means the weapon was deliberately concealed. It only means investigators had to prove where it was, how it was used, and whether it matched the injuries. The public often wants a simple version. There was a knife, there was an arrest, and therefore the case is complete. But that is not how a homicide brief is built. Detectives need the weapon to sit inside a larger chain of evidence. They need medical findings. They need statements. They need scene photographs. They need forensic testing. They need to know whether blood patterns match the account given by surviving witnesses. They need to know whether the accused had injuries, whether the father's injuries fit the same sequence, and whether the layout of the home supports the timeline. By May 15th, the legal position had sharpened. The 51-year-old O'Connor man had been charged with murder after allegedly fatally stabbing his mother. Police also confirmed that his father had been injured and taken to hospital with serious injuries. That update changed the public understanding of the family relationship, but it did not remove the need for forensic precision. A murder charge is not the end of evidence. It is the beginning of a legal process where every fact must be able to survive scrutiny. So the weapon question remains important, not because it creates mystery for the audience, but because it gives investigators a way to test the case. If the blade is recovered, where was it found? Was it inside the home or somewhere else? Was it consistent with the injuries? Did it carry fingerprints, DNA, blood, or signs of cleaning? Did its location match what witnesses said, or did it challenge the first version of events? Those are the questions that separate a police update from a court-ready case. At this point, the story was no longer just about what had been reported at 8:45 that morning. It was about whether the physical evidence inside and around the home could explain what happened before the first call reached 000. And that is why the scene itself became just as important as the people inside it. Once the woman had died and the suspect was under control, the house became a protected scene. That does not mean officers simply placed tape around the property and waited. It means the address on Dryandra Street had to be managed as a controlled evidentiary environment. Every person entering, leaving, touching, stepping over, or moving through the residence could affect what investigators were trying to preserve. ABC reported that a large area near the property remained cordoned off. Detective Acting Inspector Chris Watson said the purpose was to protect the integrity of the scene and prevent contamination, especially because there was through traffic around the area. That detail is practical, not theatrical. In a residential street, neighbors, media, emergency workers, vehicles, and curious passers-by can all complicate the early hours of a death investigation. Weight uncontrolled footprint, one moved object, or one disturbed surface can create work that later has to be explained in court. Inside the home, the process would have been even stricter. Investigators needed to identify the relevant rooms, record the condition of the property, document where the injured people were found, and preserve any marks that could help establish movement. In a case involving an alleged knife attack, blood evidence can be especially important. It may show where an injury occurred, whether someone moved after being wounded, whether another person tried to assist, or whether more than one area of the home became involved. But evidence cannot speak clearly if the scene is not protected early. That is why the first response matters. Paramedics have to save lives. Officers have to secure danger. Detectives have to preserve what remains. Those priorities can collide inside a small domestic space. Medical care may require movement. Arrest may require force. Safety may require fast entry. Later, forensic teams have to separate what happened during the incident from what happened during the emergency response. That is not a flaw in the investigation. It is the reality of a live scene. By the time the area was locked down, investigators were dealing with at least 4 layers. A deceased 79-year-old mother, a father with serious injuries, a 51-year-old son in custody, and a reported knife attack inside the family home. Each layer had to be tested against the physical layout of the property. The home was no longer just the location where police had gone. It was the record of the event itself. And the next update would make the family structure clearer than it had been the day before. On the 14th of May, investigators were careful with the family relationship. They confirmed that the 51-year-old man was a relative of the woman, but they did not publicly say more. Detective Acting Inspector Chris Watson explained that not all family members had been made aware of what had occurred. That restraint mattered. Before a name, a role, or a family label is placed into public view, police have to consider notification, accuracy, privacy, and the legal process. By the next morning, that changed. ACT Policing updated the case on Friday, May 15, 2026, stating that the 51-year-old O'Connor man had been charged with murder after allegedly fatally stabbing his 79-year-old mother. The second injured person was also identified more clearly. The man's father had been injured during the incident and taken to hospital with serious injuries. That update changed the shape of the story. This was no longer just an alleged stabbing involving relatives inside a Canberra home. It was an allegation involving a son, his mother, and his father. But even with that information, the motive still had not been publicly established. The charge tells us what police allege happened. It does not explain why it happened, what was said before the violence, whether there had been previous concerns, or what the family dynamic looked like behind closed doors. That distinction is essential. In true crime, family cases are often simplified too quickly. The audience sees mother, father, son, and immediately tries to build a motive from the relationship alone. But a relationship is not evidence of motive. It is only context. Investigators still need statements, medical reports, scene findings, and any history that may become relevant through proper legal channels. Without that, the public is left with a structure, not an explanation. The father's serious injuries also matter. They suggest the incident was not limited to one fatal act against the mother. It involved at least one other person in the home being hurt badly enough to require hospital treatment. But the exact sequence has still not been publicly detailed. Did the father try to intervene? Was he attacked separately? Was he injured before the fatal wounds were inflicted or after? Did he witness the full event or only part of it? Those questions remain open until police or court material provides clearer answers. The mother's age also adds weight to the case. She was 79. That does not change the legal standard, but it does shape how the public understands vulnerability, emergency response, and the severity of the alleged violence. Still, the script must stay controlled. She should not be reduced to a dramatic symbol. At this point, she is a deceased victim whose identity has not been publicly released in the material available here. Her life is larger than the final minutes that brought police to Dryandra Street. So by this stage, the investigation had moved from uncertainty about the relationship to a sharper allegation. A son charged with murdering his mother, while his father remained seriously injured. But the legal system had only just begun to take control of the case. The murder charge marked the next major shift. In the original police release on the 14th of May, charges were expected at a later date. By the 15th of May, that later date had arrived. Act Policing said the 51-year-old O'Connor man had been charged with murder and would face the Act Magistrates Court that day. This is a legal turning point, but it is not a conviction. That has to be made clear. A charge means police believe there is enough evidence to accuse him of the offence and bring him before the court. It does not mean the allegation has been proven. In Australia, as in any serious criminal process, the accused remains entitled to the presumption of innocence, unless and until guilt is established through the courts. That is why the wording matters. He is not the killer in a script. He is the accused man, the charged man, or the 51-year-old O'Connor man. The act can be described as an alleged fatal stabbing. The case can be described as a murder charge. But the final legal conclusion belongs to the court, not the narrator. The ACT Magistrates Court appearance is also important because it begins the public court pathway. At that stage, the court may deal with basic procedural issues: the charge, custody status, legal representation, possible future dates, and the movement of the matter through the system. A murder allegation will not be fully tested in that first appearance. The real evidentiary battle comes later, through forensic material, witness statements, medical evidence, and whatever the prosecution says supports the charge. For investigators, the question becomes broader than who was arrested. They have to prove the elements of the offence. They have to show what happened, who did it, and what mental state the law requires for the charge being pursued. That is why the early facts are only the foundation. The death during transport, the father's serious injuries, the alleged use of a knife, the arrest at the scene, the condition of the accused, and the forensic results all have to be placed into a coherent legal structure. This is also where the father's account may become critical if he is medically able to provide one. As a surviving injured person inside the residence, he may be able to help establish timing, movement, and behaviour before the emergency call. But if his injuries affected his ability to observe, speak, or recall the event, then forensic evidence may carry even more weight. Either way, his position in the case cannot be treated as background. He is not just a secondary detail. He may be a victim, a witness, and a key source for reconstructing the sequence. By the time the charge was laid, the story had narrowed, but it had not closed. Police had moved from response to accusation. The court had entered the picture. The family relationship had been clarified. But the deepest questions remained unresolved in public. What happened inside the home before 8:45 a.m.? How did the violence move through the residence? And what evidence will prosecutors rely on when the case moves beyond the first appearance? At this point, the known facts are serious but still incomplete. On Thursday the 14th of May 2026, emergency services were called to a home on Dryandra Street in O'Connor after reports that a 51-year-old man had allegedly stabbed his mother with a knife. His mother, aged 79, was treated by paramedics and declared deceased while being transported to hospital. His father was also injured and taken to hospital with serious injuries. The man was arrested at the scene, taken to hospital, and later charged with murder. He was due to face the ACT Magistrates Court on Friday, May 15, 2026. Those facts give the case its outline. They do not give it its full explanation. The first unknown is the timeline inside the home. The public still does not know what happened in the minutes before the 000 call. That period matters because it may explain whether the alleged violence began suddenly, escalated from an earlier confrontation, or unfolded across more than one part of the residence. The second unknown is the father's role in the sequence. Police have confirmed he was injured seriously, but public updates do not yet explain whether he witnessed the alleged attack, tried to intervene, was attacked separately, or became injured during the same continuous event. His account, if available, may become one of the most important parts of the case. The third unknown is the full forensic picture. The public does not yet have the medical detail, the injury pattern, the weapon recovery account, the blood evidence, or the scene reconstruction. Those details may never be fully released outside court, but they are central to how the allegation will be tested. The fourth unknown is motive. At this stage, there is no verified public explanation for why the alleged stabbing occurred. That gap should not be filled with speculation. A murder charge tells the public what police allege. It does not tell the public what was happening inside that family before the morning of 14th May. And that is where this case should end for now. Not with a false answer, but with the right questions. A mother is dead. A father is seriously injured. A son has been charged with murder. A quiet Canberra home has become the centre of a homicide case. But the court process has only just begun, and the final account will depend on evidence that has not yet been fully tested in public. For now, the most honest conclusion is also the coldest one. The emergency call brought police to Dryandra Street, but the evidence inside that home will decide what the case becomes next.